Look at that fucking timing. Holy shit.
You know what? The best part is I've had the record button going for 3 minutes, so that's on camera.
That is absolutely when we are starting this
Welcome
episode.
back to Dialog Trees. We've got the boys and our little dude Vig.
Yep, the
And I
official
have a
Dialog
bottle
Trees
of water.
mascot. How are you doing, Dude Vig? Can you meow into the microphone?
You wanna meow? You wanna meow? You're not gonna meow.
Going on his own
He's
thing,
gonna
that's
start
fine.
cuddling him, he's gonna jump.
Yeah, he's gone. All right, welcome back, everybody. Today's topic of focus is one that we're all going to have intimate knowledge of because we all are white dudes that are talking about games made in Japan. And specifically, there was a period in time when Japanese studios were looking towards the West and saying, for some reason, our products aren't selling there. We've got to change things up. It's kind of crazy to think about now because there is such a proliferation of cross-cultural stuff going on where, you know, people are looking for anime without any sort of dubbing. They want to watch it with the original Japanese voices. They want to watch it with subtitles.
Yeah, because if you don't, then you're a fucking plebeian.
Get the fuck out of here.
You have people that are, playing Near Replicant, which is itself a very weird game, and one that the studio thought would not succeed within the West without a significant redesign, and now people are playing the original version of it. Near Automata, the Persona franchise, has been popping off in the West, and it's I think it is more popular in the West than it is in Japan, or at least it's like the success of like sales units is equivalent. But anyway, there was a time when a lot of big Japanese studios, Capcom and Konami are among the major ones that come to mind, were farming out their intellectual properties to the Western developers, or else adjusting it on their own end to create more palatable experiences. And I just wanted to take a moment today to reflect back on all of this. For example, Resident Evil. It's very big and popular right now. Anybody remember Resident Evil 5 and 6? Those were a pair of games that took the horror premise of the original, which granted it was never really like a true horror game because it was always kind of treated as like horror action, and Resident Evil 4 was itself kind of a action game, but 5 and 6 were basically Michael Bay movies with a
what do you
horror
mean
flavor.
5 and 6? It went from 4 to 7. There's no 5 and 6. They just
this is true.
made a 7th game randomly.
Can
Yeah.
I make a confession?
Yep.
The only Resident Evil I've ever completed was 5.
Okay, did you at least play it with a friend?
Part of it. I played it with
Chris!
Nice. Shout out.
Chris!
But congratulations, Bruce. You are the poster child for what Capcom
That's funny
executives were
because
thinking.
everybody in this call knows who
Chris!
he's the
Self-righteous fool!
he's the
Self-righteous fool!
Anyway, let's move on.
I'm gonna bleep it all out, don't worry.
Okay, cool. He's the
Self-righteous fool!
Anyway, so that was one outcome of this. Silent Hills is also one that kind of experienced this because it goes from Silent Hill 1, 2, 3, and 4, all games that have their own fan bases, 2 and 3 especially. And then you have Homecoming and Downpour.
Hey, I actually enjoyed
games.
those games.
Totally. But there's a reason why a lot of people do not include it when they're talking about stuff they like about Silent Hill.
Yes.
Because those were games that were produced out of this belief that the original Japanese games were not commercially viable in the West, and they had to change them up. And the ways that they changed them up, I think, are very telling of the way that the Western game market was perceived elsewhere in the world. Homecoming and Downpour featured an increased reliance upon combat.
Korn doing the theme song.
Yeah.
Wait, really?
Yeah,
Fucking John
Korn did
Davies
the theme song for Downpour.
Yeah.
Look, it wasn't a bad song, but it shouldn't be for Silent Hill.
And what we would say is stuff that's a little less focused on the psychological horror aspect of it all. A little more in your face stuff in that regard. I've also brought to mind of Devil May Cry. For example, Nero, as a character, was introduced in Devil May Cry 4 because that was an attempt to reboot the franchise in the West with a fresh new protagonist, get people involved on the Xbox, which was seen as a very Western console.
On that one particularly, I think that's like the softest possible reboot, because they straight up had, like, it was straight up a continuation of the original trilogy. Like, Dante was a main character.
I don't mean we
heavily alluded in the game to Nero being Virgil's son, which was later confirmed. I would say that the Western one that's a better is just DMC.
Is DMC. Yeah, but that's actually where Devil May Cry 4. I don't mean a reboot in the story sense of they reset the plot and redo the story. I mean in like the grand sense of like this is a fresh. This is a fresh.
I know what you mean. I still don't think Devil May Cry 4 is like the westernization of it. Maybe a bit. Like they were like, hey, let's make this a little more. Like it's basically set in Rome.
Yeah.
But it still very clearly is just more of the original trilogy. But definitely DMC is like, yo, let's make this America, motherfucker. Straight up to like the
Fuck
enemies.
that game.
Well, I
hear it was really good.
I had to force myself to beat it.
Yeah, I think that game's a fascinating example because the studio itself, Ninja Theory, was trying to make it more faithful to the original games, and it was Capcom that was asking them, no, push it in a different direction. We want this to strike its own chord. We want it to be more Western.
Design yourself as the main character.
Yeah. And that's really like where that game came from, is that the team itself wanted to make a Devil May Cry game. It was Capcom that insisted that this become DMC and a whole new take on the original franchise property.
So, sorry, just DMC reminds me very heavily of the game I'm about to bring up, and I'm wondering your take on if that's another aspect to westernize. And what's that? Hideo Kojima's bursted his fucking way out of the vault again. Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance. Metal Gear Rising, like, Kojima's always been obsessed with the West, so it's hard to say if he was trying to like break in there specifically, but like the final boss of Rising is a U.S. senator, is like the personification of the military-industrial complex. Like that's
and
straight
beloved
up, like,
family man.
Yeah, like that's straight up like, hey, how can we make Metal Gear Solid more Western, right? Or
I disagree. It's really? I think it's just you, because you're talking about plot points that are Western, but I'm talking about gameplay trends and tropes.
Okay.
And story beats.
You're a ninja. Remember, this game came out in like 2010, 2011. You're a ninja with a sword cutting mechs into tiny pieces.
Yeah,
sounds very Japanese.
This was during the ninja craze. Like, do you remember Pirates and Ninjas and everybody obsessed with, like, I think this, maybe I'm reaching.
You just said cutting mechs, that's like 100% Japanese.
Well, I think the thing is that we're looking at this, but like Platinum Games is one of those studios that I would say isn't the one that has ever like sort of compromised its take on this subject. Platinum Games has kind of remained its own kind of brand of quirky and been unafraid to do things. The most that I could think of them kind of having to kind of deal with this is Nier, because Nier Replicant stars Nier, who is a young pretty boy that
I love
is
them
running
boys.
around this goofy world. Yeah, and then you have Nier Gestalt, or just Nier as it was known in the West, featuring big angry muscle man trying to protect his daughter. He was gravelly and angry and such. And
Are you describing The
that's-
Last of Us?
Yeah, that's a trope that's very common in Western games and still is, but it wasn't as big in Japan. So it, like, making the protagonist of Nier turn into something more along the lines of Kratos, of Marcus Phoenix, was an attempt to appeal to a Western market. That's who we're really talking about when we're talking about Westernization. We're not talking about Westernization in the past 10 years. We're talking about 2008, when the kings of video games were angry men with giant shoulders that were screaming and tearing off heads. Like, that's what Japan saw when they looked and said, we wanted to Westernize our games.
So with you saying that, I'm right now gonna say this trend is not dead. And there's two words that confirm it. Kill chaos.
Okay, I knew that's where you were going.
Yeah.
Final Fantasy went from the most flamboyant shit, and then, you know, like, they tried to find that middle ground where, like, you know, 15 starred basically like a K-pop idol. But now it's back to, like, I'm Marcus Phoenix killing chaos. Here's my token funny and my token black friend. Like,
And we all hate chaos.
His personality is that he's funny. His personality is that he's black.
Mine, I'm angry.
yeah, okay, I see. That's what you mean by Westernization, right?
Well, that's what I think is what Japan meant by it, because we can look back and see the attempts to Westernize. Another thing that I would look at is the issue where these properties were handed over to Western developers to get them to kind of give their own take on it. Konami did this with Silent Hills, Homecoming and Downpour, and they also did it with Lords of Shadow. Lords of Shadow was, for a lot of people, it was a good game. Lords of Shadow 2, maybe less so, but you could definitely see that Lords of Shadow was chasing after a lot of trends in the gaming world at that time. Some of them Japan and Japanese in influence, a lot of them Western. God of War, again, comes to mind. God of War was huge in that time period.
Lords of Shadow was just trying to be God of War.
Yeah, and it was a Western studio that did it. And it was a concerted effort to take Castlevania, something that hadn't got a proper 3D iteration in years, and give it a fresh life in a new market, on new consoles. Xbox, again, is constantly brought up because Xbox just doesn't sell in Japan, or really anywhere that's not the West. And there was a concerted attempt to get on that platform. So Castlevania Lords of Shadow was an example of how this kind of manifested. And it's up to... Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think Lords of Shadow is a fantastic example, especially when you said you haven't seen a 3D representation of a Castlevania game in so long. Because remember what the previous 3D Castlevania games were. Like, I can't think of the title of it, but it's the one starring Hector. Hector is, like, the prettiest of pretty boys. And, like, he's just, like, a blonde twink necromancer with, like, basically daddy issues. Like, absolutely this is rebranding. And the other one, the other big 3D game before that, you were, like, a werewolf guy fighting off other werewolves to save, like, a young girl. Like, but you weren't, like, a big, super strong werewolf guy. No, that was your friend from the village. You're, like, the weak, outcast werewolf guy. Absolutely, that's very non-Western. So, yeah, I think Lords of Shadow might be one of the best examples you could have brought up.
Yeah. So anyway, what I wanted to do was bring up this topic and then kind of, like, explain a little bit of its origins and ultimately why I think was a little patronizing, because a lot of these games that we've talked about are not fondly remembered by people. I think it's because the whole topic of, like, Westernizing has gotten increasingly out of favor with people in the West. When we consume Japanese products, we kind of like them because of this unique stuff that Japan brings to the table, or any other foreign media. Like, you know, we're kind of looking for an outside perspective, and sometimes when stuff like this happens, it's seen as like patronizing almost. So I wanted to throw it out there and see what you guys thought as far as what you kind of remember from that time period, as far as like Japanese franchises that came to the West in different ways. And just like what you think like the limits are in terms of like where people are willing to accept like really gonzo Japanese video games.
See, at that period of my life, like I grew up playing mostly Japanese games.
Yeah.
You know, I had a Nintendo as a kid. I had a Nintendo 64 and I got a GameCube and I had a PlayStation 2. Like, I played Final Fantasy. I played Kingdom Hearts. I played obviously like Zelda. I played more Final Fantasy. Like,
well, I think Nintendo is a great example of like how, because I can't think of a single example where Nintendo did, you know, kind of like attempt to westernize their products. Maybe Metroid Prime, because it was first person and they didn't do it themselves. They gave it to a Western developer, but like they don't. It doesn't seem as like common with their stuff as with other Japanese studios.
They just make games that everyone can enjoy. They don't like specifically like cater to Japanese market or Western market. They just make a game for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And like I'm having a hard time thinking of it because until that time, I didn't like I guess the only like American, like big American games that I'm like that's obviously Western is like Need for Speed. Like I played Need for Speed Underground, you know, I played a little bit like Tony Hawk's and stuff, but those like Need for Speed is the only real like Western game I played until I picked up Call of Duty in like 2010. But the caveat being Resident Evil 5, because I was finally like, you know, I was like 14. I was like, I'm an adult now. I can play this game that I play as a kid and got scared of. Because like I watched my sister play Resident Evil 1 and 2 and 3, like the original Nemesis. Like I watched her play on like a PS1, and it scared the fuck out of me. It was great. And then I was like, oh, I get to play this game now. And I bought 5, and I was like, yeah, this game's scary. This is what it's all about, because I was dumb. But
yeah,
I can't really think of like any like the difference between Eastern and Western games before that, because I didn't really learn what a Western game was until like the 2010 area.
Yeah,
like,
this is the same guy that hated Dragon Age because it wasn't like a JRPG.
Yeah, I only played Western game, or I only played Japanese games. Like, fuck it.
Well, that's
Dragon Age was confusing as fuck.
That's I think another interesting dimension to this, and like the idea of like different markets for different genres. Like the first-person shooter is a distinctly Western idea. You don't get a lot of these anywhere outside of America, really.
Eastern Europe.
Yeah, Eastern Europe, but those tend to have a different flavor than
it's all Counter-Strike.
Yeah, pick a blood. Like that's something that's very distinctly American and Western, as is the racing game. Like you don't get a lot of like I think like super detailed, highly accurate and faithful Forza Motorsports or Grand Prix.
Gran Turismo.
Is that
Double Dash.
Double Dash is Japanese. What? Wait, is Gran Turismo Japanese? Probably?
Yeah, it's a Sony thing.
Yeah.
Oh shit! Oh,
It's
I
not
take it
Sony,
back.
I don't think it's Sony of America.
I'm pretty
just stuff
sure
that
it's
back in.
Japan.
Yeah, I was
But
gonna
now
say,
you're
I'm
making me
pretty sure
question it.
Because Gran Turismo goes back to like PS1.
PS1.
Like I'm pretty sure that predates Sony of America.
Oh yeah, no, you're completely correct. I These completely
Yep.
slip past
It's a
me.
Japanese studio. Polyphony
Oh.
Digital.
All right, I'm completely
I-
mistaken.
So, I'm gonna do the thing I always do and bring it back to fighting games. I think that's a good example of where things got westernized, because fighting games have always been big in East Asia. You know, Japan, Korea, Pakistan, places like that. And there is you know, you've got like the Mortal Kombats, but there's a clear difference between things like Street Fighter and Tekken, even like Guilty Gear, which is very much Japanese, and then like Mortal Kombat or Killer Instinct. And I do think there was a trend around that time. I think you can look and see those Eastern fighting games trying to emulate more of the style, where you tried to get things like bloody and, you know, be the Mortal Kombat. But I think that's now reversed back, where things are you know, Western games are trying to be more like the Eastern fighting games, because those are the ones that people really pop off for. And like, yeah, you know, like anything NetherRealm puts out, being like Injustice or Mortal Kombat, that's gonna have a big following, but
But it's
like
not the same type.
it's not the same. Like Tekken is one of the biggest fighting game franchises in the world, and like one of the, like, you know, the mainstays, like the grand finale kind of stage at Evo or something. And like Tekken is a very, very Korean game, right? And I think that's an interesting point of, like, you see the westernization and then the further easternization.
Well, yeah, it's the French. They kind of realized that people were willing to go with the original text unaltered, so they just did that. They just didn't worry about the West anymore, or at least didn't cater to that idea of what the West looked like.
It's funny that we like grew up with Japanese games just like catering to the East, and all of a sudden they're like, well, shit, these people don't like these games. How do we fix that? I honestly think they just started to see like Call of Duty and God of War numbers, and were like, well, we want those numbers, so
Exactly. Well, I mean, that's
make
the
it
thing.
gritty.
That console gaming in the West only really popped off, I think, with the PlayStation 2 and Xbox. That was when a lot of people in the West, in other markets, were like, oh, there's actual money to be had here. Well, let's see what's doing well and work with that. And it continued on with the 7th generation. Is that the Xbox 360?
Probably, sure.
Yeah,
The
I
Xbox
feel like
360 generation.
yeah, the Xbox 360 generation. I feel like that was another turning point, because that was, you know, specifically like a console that Japan wanted to make inroads on, or at least Japanese developers wanted to make inroads on. One final point of interest: Nintendo, while not in the process of westernizing their games, have not released certain things because they thought that it wasn't going to work out well.
I was gonna bring this up.
Yep. And what comes to mind more than anything else? Mother 3.
Hashtag release. Hashtag in the comments below. Localize Mother 3. I've been waiting this whole video to say that.
Yeah.
Localize Mother 3.
And like, that's a game where the executives at Nintendo were like, nah, this will not work in the US. Or was it Earthbound?
Mother and Earthbound are the same.
Okay.
The title is a localization thing.
Okay. Anyway, so there was this fear that like the franchise just wouldn't do well because it was too weird. It was too out there. And then like fast forward a couple decades, and one of the biggest games in the world is made in the West by a developer who was inspired by weird gonzo shit like Earthbound, like Mother 3, called Undertale. And you see this
Starring
whole
Sans Undertale.
Starring Sans Undertale. And like, it's like this full like refutation of the idea that it was never going to work, because Undertale proved it was going to work, and it was going to work big. People do want that type of weird, you know, experimental shit. I guess my ultimate point is just I feel like corporate needs to be less afraid about appealing to weird markets, because I think they're out there.
Well, I would even say, like, yes, you know, Toby Fox, right? That's the
Yeah.
developer's name. Yeah, he like that's one thing. Undertale's one thing, but also again like the release of the Persona franchise and how well they did every iteration in the West. Like those games are fucking out there, man. Like I've never played a Persona, not because I'm not interested, but because I know I would disappear. Because like I put 150 hours into my first playthrough of Horizon Zero Dawn. First playthrough, not even New Game Plus, just the game. And that's not a game with like choices and branching and shit. I would be gone for Persona because I'd need to do everything. But those games, like I'm interested in like a lot of like Christian mythology or like Abrahamic mythology and like esotericism. And I was like looking up the demiurge and like learning about that, and I was like, wait, what the fuck? The demiurge is the final boss of Persona 5? I was like, what the fucking hell? Like this is so fucked up. And I was like, why does the Gospel of Judas come into the fucking Persona 5? And then these two were like, yeah, you always kill God, man. And I'm like, this is wild. So of course, like, just Nintendo release Mother 3.
Atlas, make another Persona.
Nyarlathotep is not the demiurge.
I know, but Nyarlathotep was the villain of Persona 2.
Wait, really?
And a lot of people insist that that he must be active in the other Persona games. Like every new one that comes out, there's people like trying to figure out like if he is
Persona falls
related
into
in
the
some way.
mythos?
Yes.
Damn.
Yes, it does. No, it's cool,
Controlling
man.
chaos. That's cool as fuck.
Yep. And you also fight Hitler in the second one, but that's another story. Oh, sorry, not Hitler. The Führer is different. The Führer has a pair of cool shades.
Persona 2 era was such a wild ride.
Yep.
Holy shit, I didn't know Nyarlathotep was in.
Yep.
Fucking my Lovecraft like anthology is sitting behind me, and now, oh no, I'm going down a rabbit hole tonight.
Yeah. Anyway, that was basically the topic. I think Bruce said it best. Just localize Mother 3 already. I mean, there's already fan patches and translations out there, but just do it. Just do it, like, Nintendo.
Localize it. Just fucking localize it without getting rid of the weird shit. Like,
yeah,
I get it. Like, there's some things that sort of make sense, but how about, like, you know what else you should localize? Localize Dead or Alive Extreme Beach Volleyball 5.
Bruce has enough jerk-off material. Please do not localize it.
Please do not. We need him. Speaking of Bruce disappearing, please do not do this. I mean, Doki Doki Plus just came out, so...
I'm so tempted to buy it on Steam Summer Sale, but, like, I told the story. I was like, my roommate was like, yeah, it's like a 3-hour game, you'll have fun. And, like, for 2 days, he didn't see me, and when I emerged from my room, it was just Monica.
I don't know if I ever told you this, Eric, but he came out of his room, sat down with me, and his screen was stuck at the Monica staring at you bit of the game. And he just, like, was hanging out with me, and he's just like, I'm playing with my girlfriend.
It's just Monica. That's all you need.
All you need.
And literally, he was like, no, dude, you just delete the files in the game. And I'm like... But I don't want to. I was like, yeah, why would I do this? Like, I won the game. I won. I got Monica. Like, it's done. And he's like, no, this is what you do. And I was like, why would I do that? No, this is what you're supposed to do. Well, no, I'm playing the game, motherfucker. Stop. I'm playing.
Yep.
So, maybe I'll buy Doki Doki Plus. Comment down below if I should buy Doki Doki Plus or not.
Comment no.
And
just comment no.
Don't forget to donate to our Patreon / buy me a coffee / OnlyFans so we
literally don't have one. That's false advertising. We don't have one.
We don't have one yet.
I'm gonna make one before this video goes live, motherfucker.
Okay, cool.
Gotta get Brayden a PC that he doesn't.
We'll post Brayden feet pics if you get him a PC.
Yep. That's wait
That
a
is a
minute. What?
Dialog Trees guarantee. It's already said. You can't go back now.
Can't go
They would
back
just look
now.
like liars.
Yep. We can't be that.
Maybe if you calling you out. Maybe if you edited some of your own fucking videos, that you could take that out, but you don't. So you know what? It's in there. It's canon.
It's canon
I
to
think
the
so.
Dialog Trees lore.
Thanks for joining us, everyone, on Dialog Trees.
Bye.
Have a good day.
Bye.